Hi, it's Sandy, and today I am finally filming my May wrap-up. Can you imagine if I was on my March wrap-up? That would be so late. It is currently 15, 16, 17 degrees here in Scotland, which to us means it is hot as hell. My hair is not loving it. I'm trying out a new hairstyle, and honestly at this point I'm probably going to get a whole bunch of it cut off because I can't deal with this long hair anymore. So yeah, I think the hair's going to go, but I'm liking the getting more accustomed to the side fringe, but I keep touching it so it looks a mess. But yeah, so it is roasting warm. I am boiling. I've got my handy bottle of water. So I'm just going to go over the books that I read in May. So I read these books mostly for the May the 4th Read With You readathon that was hosted by BreakevenBooks and CoffeeOverApples. I will have a link to their channels in the description. So I took part in that over the course of May, and once I finished the light side prompts, I decided I was going to do the neutral prompts, and then it didn't really match in with what I wanted to read, so I just decided, I've already done the readathon, it's fine, I'll just read what I want. So that's where it kind of got a little bit chaotic. So I am going to go through the books. I read 12 books this month. I read 9 books physically and 3 on audio, I believe. So yeah, quite a big month. That was really surprising to me. Although at the end of May, the last couple of weeks of May, I have been off sick from work. I'm still off sick and it is now the 7th. I'm not feeling great, so you're gonna have to excuse me if I look like hell. But yeah, so I'm just gonna get started and get into the books. So I did make a TBR for this readathon, but things didn't go to plan. So I decided to start on the light side, and I've got the prompts over there just so I can remember them on my computer. So the first prompt and the first book I read was Jedi Council, sequel or book in a series. I did plan to read something else for that, and I can't remember what it was, but I ended up reading Meant to be Immortal by Lindsay Sands. This is a continuation of the Arjuna series that I absolutely love. I read these books the minute they come in the door, and it just so happened that because it is a book in a series that I decided to count that, because I wasn't really feeling the book I was supposed to read. It just wasn't really doing it for me. So because I'm a mid-reader, I didn't want to slump on my first book, so I read this. This is a carry-on from the previous books about scientific vampires who came from Atlantis, and this is a romance, and this is Mac and CJ finding each other. So very good. It didn't follow exactly how the others followed, so that was really interesting. It didn't have that moment of, oh my god, are they going to die? So that was really interesting to have that slight difference. It's still not, you know, these things are never going to be fantastic works of literature, but they are my favourite series ever. I love them. It's the only romance that I really gravitate to, so I really enjoyed this. It was amazing. I love being in the world again, and I can't wait to reread them all, but I've got so much on my TBR that I'm not going to be rereading them anytime soon. The next prompt for Force Spirit is a book with paranormal elements. So for that I read The Visitors by Simon Sylvester. This is based in the Scottish Islands, and it is based on a made-up island, and there's a little outcrop beside it called Dog Rock, and these strangers move into the house in Dog Rock and start doing it up. And Flora, our main character, she is going to school on the mainland, and she's having to write a report on a Scottish myth, so she chooses Selkies. Selkies are basically seal people, so they are seals in the water and then they can come onto land, take off their seal skin, and they're humans. And there's a lot of Selkie mythology in Scotland, so that's the paranormal element that I used for this. I've had this book since it came out. I've had this book since this was published, and I've not read it because I didn't think I would like it, and I ended up loving it. It is one of my favourite books I've read so far this year. So much so that my mother-in-law has decided to pick it up, and I'm trying to get my wife to read it, because the way Simon Sylvester picks up on island life in the UK or in Scotland is so well done. My in-laws, my wife and her family are from Islay. Islay is mentioned in this quite a lot, so it was just weird to me, and the place they are from in Islay was mentioned in this book, so it was kind of a weird thing that I had this book and hadn't read it even before I met my wife. But yeah, so I absolutely loved this. I loved the mythology part of it, I loved the slight mystery side to it. It was just so much better than I could have anticipated. I absolutely loved it. The next book I read was for healing. Read a book from your favourite genre, and for that I read What Did You Do in the War, Sister by Dennis J. Turner. This is based on true accounts of the nuns in the order of... I'm not quite sure, I can't remember. Anyway, there was an order of nuns in Belgium during World War II who decided to resist the Nazis, and this is a fictionalised story made up of things that the author gleaned from research, diaries from the nuns, etc. about how they took part in the resistance. They were hiding people, hiding allies, hiding Jewish children, Jewish people. Even though they were Christian, they decided that, you know, you shouldn't be killing Jewish people because they're Jewish. That's just not what they believed in. So they decided to take a stand, and nobody's going to question a nun, you know? So yeah, I really enjoyed this. It was more like non-fiction than I would have liked. Non-fiction tends to take me a while to get through. That was the only downside to this. Other than that, it was really, really good. Yeah, so I really enjoyed that. Not much else to say about it. I feel like historical fiction, especially sort of true-based historical fiction, I would recommend you read this. So the next prompt was knowledge. Read one of the oldest books on your shelf / TBR, and I think that covered if you've had it for the longest or if it is an older book. So for that I chose Little Women by Louise May Alcott. This was published in 18 something, so it is a very old book and probably the oldest I have on my TBR shelf. This is about 4 sisters who live with their mother and their servant, and they are basically just living life. This is done around the American Civil War, and their father is away to fight for the northern states because this family believes that slavery is wrong, that the things that the southern states are doing is wrong, and they were on the northern side of the Civil War. So this basically just follows the sisters as they live their life. It's quite a long book, so it goes from them being very young to them ended up, you know, mothers and wives and things like that. And it's just kind of like watching a TV show, slice of life. Sections. It mainly follows Jo, who's the second oldest sister, and a lot of it you see from her perspective, but it does show the others, and I ended up really enjoying it. It's so well written and so descriptive that I feel like the movies have really done justice to it, because there's a lot of source material to work with. There's obviously bits that are missing, and I wish in the movies they'd gone a bit more into Meg's story, because in the book Meg's story is actually really nice, and the films focus a lot on either Jo or Amy, and then obviously with Beth as well. But yeah, I really, really liked this. For a classic, it was very easy to read. It took me months to read because I didn't want it to end, so I was reading tiny, tiny bits at a time. And the sort of more archaic language it makes me tired, so it's harder to read. And obviously with being sick and I've been really floppy because of my EDS, so reading a heavy book like this was difficult. But yeah, so that's the book I finished for that prompt, and I really enjoyed it. And again, I did not pick the correct book for this prompt because I decided not to read. I think it was such a fun age I had, and I think I just didn't decide to read that because I was kind of running out of steam a bit by the time I got to this book. So I wanted to read something a bit easier. So for this prompt, it is Cleansed, book with a white cover, and for that I read Punching the Air by Basil Boy and Yusuf Salam. This is written in verse and is about a black boy who ends up going to jail, black man who ends up going to jail, but I think he's quite young when he goes to jail. And just about his time in jail and the way he's treated by people and the way he's treated by society and guards and things like that, just because he's black, and even in amongst black people, the way that he's treated. This is such an important story. If memory serves, because I read this quite early in the month, I don't think he actually did anything. He just happened to be, you know, in the wrong place at the wrong time. He had a fight with some white boys, and the white boys are the ones that caused the issue, and, you know, the black boys are the ones that got in trouble, and he specifically got in trouble, and the others got away with it. So yeah, 16 years old. 16 years old and tried as an adult. That's ridiculous. And the thing that makes this even worse is that Yusuf Salam has gone through something like this, and this is why he wrote this book. I don't even understand the way some of the criminal system works, where some people are penalised in a way that is just not fair. That's to say the least. I feel like books like this are very important, especially since Yusuf Salam has gone through this and he knows what he's talking about. And the way Ibi Zoboi has, you know, made this into a beautiful book has been fantastic. There's illustrations through it. Amal, who is the main character, he is an artist, and that is something that he's not allowed to do in jail, which is really unfair, and it's just, I can't give this book enough praise. Yusuf Salam is part of the Exonerated Five. I did know what that was, and thank you to my memory loss, I can't remember what it is, but please look this up. Please, you know, please read this. It's so important. You know, a 16-year-old boy, for the rest of his life, he is basically going to be stamped as a criminal for a small thing that happened, and that happens far too often these days. I just saw in the news this morning, it was breaking news in the UK, that a man who raped and murdered two 15-year-olds is getting out of jail. And yet, for having a fight with people his own age and nobody dying, he gets put in jail. I don't understand it. I'm not going to get into it because then I won't stop. But pick it up, I love it. It looks like a chunker, but because a lot of it is in prose, you know, it's a one sitting reading. Love it. Okay, so after that I went on to the Allies, which for the light side was Rebel Alliance and Resistance. So for Rebel Alliance, it was a book with a rebellion, and for that I read Cinderella is Dead by Kaylin Barron. I really like this book. This is about, so it's 200 years since Cinderella found her prince, but the fairy tale is over. Because of the story of Cinderella, every girl in this society has to go to a ball every year. They have 3 tries, and if they are not picked by a man, usually ones that are old enough to be their fathers, or worse, they are taken away somewhere where nobody knows and they disappear. This follows Sophia, and Sophia is in love with her best friend, who happens to be a girl, and Sophia does not want to marry a man, but she also doesn't want to disappear. So this is about her rebelling against that. Not necessarily openly rebelling, but rebelling in her own way. I don't want to give too much away, but this actually went in a direction that I wasn't expecting, and I really enjoyed that. I think I would have enjoyed this more if it had been a new adult or adult book rather than a young adult, but for a young adult writing, it was a very, very good book. There's nothing wrong with young adult. I love young adult. I just, by the time I read this, I'd gotten into the groove of reading adult books, which I never used to read adult books, so going to reading this, it just dulled enjoyment a bit, which is a shame, but I know on reread that I will really, really like this. There's certainly a few things in this I would love to tab. Yeah, I really, really enjoyed this, and I think it's a fantastic twist on the Cinderella story. So the next book I read was actually on my Kindle app, and I didn't mention that at the start, but I read one book via Kindle, and that was for Resistance, a book from your least favourite genre. So I picked a horror book, and I read The Turn of the Screw by Henry James. I've got it on my story graph. So this is quite a short horror about a man who's having a party, and one of his friends that's at the party says that he's discovered this diary, or this journal of a woman who went through a horrific experience, and basically he decides to read this diary to his friend, and it's just her story about how she goes to be a governess to this little girl in this big house, and then the brother ends up coming back from school as well, and these things keep happening, and it's paranormal horror. I didn't really get it. I didn't like it. I mean, it was my least favourite genre, usually because I'm scared. And yeah, reading it in bed at night, I was expecting to find the valet's face right there, and I was not a fan. It is Books and Lila's one of her favourite books, so I wanted to give it a chance, but I ended up really not liking it, and it's only 121 pages. It took me ages to read it, and I hated it. I really, really didn't like it, and I would never pick it up ever again. And I'm not really wanting to pick up anything by him ever again. On audiobook, I read The House on the Cerulean Sea, and that is by T.J. Klune, and I think everybody knows about this by now. It is about a house on the Cerulean Sea. It's about this character who is part of the people that protect magical children, and he's a caseworker. He is sent to this house to make sure that the children are being looked after, that it's being run properly, etc, etc, etc. And then there's a catch that the kids that are on the island and in this house are magical kids that are a bit more dangerous. So you've got the Antichrist, and you've got a creature who nobody actually knows what he is. So he's basically been sent there to try and shut them down because one of the bosses is a complete douchebag, to say the least, and he ends up falling in love with their caretaker. To be perfectly honest, I did not like this book. I was so excited to read it because everybody was raving about it, and then I ended up not liking it, which is such a shame. I can see why people enjoy it, but I just didn't. I don't know. It read almost like Jasper Ford, Shades of Grey, where the narrator really got on my nerves, and then the narrator, as in the main character, I can't remember his name, but I'm not interested. Lionel something, I'm not sure. I liked the characters of the kids. The kids were really funny, especially Lucy, who's the Antichrist, Lucifer, and I liked the story that you get of the caretaker. But other than that, I feel like it needed to either be a series or I don't know. I just think it was ambitious and it didn't do what it set out to do, in my opinion. And also, after seeing the controversy, or not even controversy, T.J. Klune openly said that he used residential schools in Canada as a template for his book. And you know, we've all seen in the news at the moment, there's been the remains of around 215 children that were taken to residential schools in Canada, and they were basically mistreated, mishandled, I would argue tortured, because, you know, they found bodies of children down to 3 years old, and for a 3-year-old just to pop their clogs, I don't think that's particularly normal. And then all these children were just chucked into a mass grave. And that's no way to treat children, and that's not even going into how they were actually treated while they were there. That would be a whole nother thing, and you know, that's something that you should probably do your own research on. At the moment, the Indigenous communities in Canada and America are going through a lot because it is more and more coming to light, and publicly coming to light, just how badly their people were treated by these residential schools. So given that T.J. Klune decided to kind of make light of that, and he did make light of it in his statement, it makes me even more uncomfortable about this book, and I would not be reading it again. I will not be picking up a copy, and you know, I think if it's something you might enjoy, then read it, but be aware that the author has sort of gladly taken inspiration for something that is still an extremely painful mark on the Native American peoples. I also think that it needs to be noted that, you know, residential schools, I think, were still open while I was alive. So when I was born, yeah, and I'm only 28 years old, and you think these sort of things, oh yeah, no, it happened in like the 16, 17, 1800s. No, it happened recently, and it's not on. So yeah, I ended up not enjoying that book even before I found that out, and now that I found that out, I'm even less impressed. the next book I read on audio was not this book, which is Becoming by Michelle Obama. The book I read was A Promised Land by Barack Obama. I'm just using this as a placeholder, and hopefully I'll have the two of them next to each other. That was a long book. That was like 24 hours worth of book on audio, and it was Barack Obama talking about his time as president. A lot of things made me so angry in that book about how he was treated, how Michelle was treated, and how the parties and the people in some of the parties were so horrifically selfish and awful. And you know, I live in Scotland. I've had the NHS for my entire life. I've never had to pay out of pocket for healthcare, and I'm lucky in so many ways because of that. Even in Scotland, I've never had to pay money for a prescription before. I've never had to pay anything towards my healthcare, unless I've bought something out of a pharmacy, but that's, you know, fair enough. And the struggles he had putting through a health bill were horrendous, and that made me so angry. You know, the fact that, what, you want us to try and look after poor people? Yes, that's your job. Like, your job is to look after the people of your country, and that includes all of the people of your country. So yeah, that made me really, really mad. And honestly, I'm not sure why I ended up going for a second term, because I would have cracked much faster than he did. And I'm so glad I can be a bit more vocal now about everything that happened. But yeah, I actually really enjoyed it. I love reading memoirs like that. It's so interesting to see, you know, what happened during his time, because you don't really know. Obviously a lot of this is from his side, so you don't know what other people are thinking, etc, etc, but it is a very well done book in the sense that it's not overly floral, it's very to the point. So yeah. Okay, so we're down to the last 3 books that I read, and they were all part of the same series, and that was The Magicians, The Magician King, and The Magician Land, all by Lev Grossman. So this is a trilogy. It's marked as Harry Potter for adults. It is not Harry Potter for adults, it's more like Narnia for adults, like in the sense that I'm pretty sure if he didn't credit C.S. Lewis for a lot of the inspiration for the work, that C.S. Lewis's family could sue and would win very, very easily. So The Magicians is a series about Quentin Coldwater, who goes for an interview to get into Princeton, I believe, and gets led through a magical door to a magical exam, and he passes the exam and gets offered a place at BreakevenBooks, which is a magical school, but it's a magical college, not a magical high school, where the adult part comes in. And the first book really just zooms through his 5 years at BreakevenBooks. I absolutely love these books. I love if anybody's read it, I love the Goose Thing. The Goose Thing is my favourite thing of all time. I could reread that just forever. This follows him through his time there, meeting his friends, Alice, Elliot, Janet, etc. And then he discovers that Fillory, which is the group of books that they grew up reading as children, is a real place. And they go to Fillory and they become the kings and queens of Fillory. So the first book in the Fillory tales tells of Martin, who goes through a clock and comes to this magical land where it's always, I think it's always winter or always summer or something like that. And him and his siblings end up going on adventures and they become the kings and queens. You know, sound familiar? And there are 2 ram gods, Ember and Umber, and they send them back and then they go. And in this world they have discovered that it's actually real, and they go there and they then have to fight the beast. So this sort of accumulates in this book. The Magician King then goes on at a time, they bring Quentin back to Fillory because he is left, because he is distraught at some of the things that happened in the first book. And this is where his old friend Julia comes back into it as well, because she becomes one of the queens of Fillory. And Quentin then goes on a quest to get these keys, or this key, or something, I can't quite remember. But something's happening in Fillory and they need to figure out what's going on. So Quentin decides he's going to go on this quest, because his whole life all he's wanted is a quest, his own adventure. And that obviously goes seriously awry, because look at that. And it's got sea travel, again, it's very much Narnia-esque, Voyage of the Dawn Treader type thing. where they go to the islands outside of the world, or outside of Fillory anyway. But yeah, I really like this, and it just brings so much more into it. Then with the Magician's Land, Fillory is in serious danger, so they've discovered in the last book that Fillory is in danger, and then they fix that, and then Fillory's in even more danger because the land is running out of time. So this is about finding the 7 keys, of which they already had one, but this is years and years later. Quentin is part of this heist that goes kind of awry, and Elliot in Fillory is trying to find these 7 keys, and he ends up going to Quentin for help. And you know, they go back to Fillory, try and save Fillory, yay, that sort of thing. And yeah, it's just, I do think they've done really well with the way he's done these books. It does cover quite a lot of time, like I think it covers the period of more than a decade. And if you're a fan of Narnia but you want adult books, and I mean very adult, like there are so many trigger warnings that I could give you for these, then I would definitely recommend them, but do look up the trigger warnings first. Things like that don't bother me, so at least in books it doesn't bother me. If it happens to a real person it bothers me, but the things that happen, it happens in a book, it doesn't really bother me. So yeah, finally, that was all the books I read in May. That's 12 books in May. 12 books in May. I cannot believe that. Hopefully I'll be able to do something similar in June. I've already read 3 books in June, which is great because it's only been the first week. So hopefully I'll carry on that momentum. So yeah, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and let me know if you have any opinions on the books down below. I'll see you later. Bye!